focused on supplies from CPO mills and plantations under their ownership and/or direct control, whereas the third-party supply from independent mills and plantations, which compromises a large portion of the industry supplies, remains an outlier for which a shared traceability solution is needed today. Key stakeholders in the palm oil industry need to provide support to the smallholders in collecting their data and prevent their exclusion from the traceability supply chain. Considering untraceable suppliers will soon be unable to enter the global market and its requirements. To discuss further about this issue with various stakeholders, WWF Indonesia, in collaboration with Accountability Framework Initiative Southeast Asia, has organized today's panel discussion. Before we start, I want to greet and welcome all of our speakers today, including Ms. Ananda Putri Permatasari, Senior Coordinator, Accountability Framework Initiative Southeast Asia Coalition. We also have Mr. John Dodsworth today with us from Dodsworth, a Drivers Initiative lead, WWF UK. We also have Mr. Fitrian Ardiansha, Impact Director for Asia Climate Smart Landscape Fund. And Mr. Wisnu Wibisono, Project Manager, Asia Investor Group on Climate Change. Before we start today's panel's discussion, we have a very special guest today with us. To open, please welcome Chief Conservation Officer of WWF Indonesia, Mrs. Dewi Rizky, to give opening remarks. Mrs. Dewi Rizky has over 25 years. Ibu has over 25 years of experience in the field of conservation and has been newly appointed CCO of WWF Indonesia, where she oversees programs such as forest and wildlife, marine and fisheries, and climate and market transformation. Ms. Dewi holds a Master's of Science in Resources Management from Edinburgh University, Scotland. Please welcome.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, so many colleagues here, and also ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to honor and to welcome you all in this event on creating inclusive supply chain, incentivizing and facilitating smallholders traceability here in Jakarta, Indonesia, supported by WWF Indonesia and also WRI, Asia Secretariat of Accountability Framework Initiative. I would like to also inform you all that we are actually being attended by 6 speakers, as already informed before, representing multi-stakeholder organizations from various backgrounds. Therefore, this discussion will provide us not only essential knowledge, but also a great opportunity to share experiences, both technical and regulatory issues. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratefulness to the organizer team, and in particular our honorable speakers and also moderator. All of them have allocated their time for all of us today, this evening, even though they are very busy with their responsibilities and their agencies. We truly appreciate your participation. Palm oil production, as we already know, has been a key driver of deforestation, peat conversion, forest fires and exploitation in Indonesia, and also Malaysia and other production countries. Many very large companies and global brands producing and sourcing palm oil products have published no deforestation, development and exploitation policies with the goal of achieving zero deforestation by 2020. However, many fail to meet this goal. One of the fundamental reasons for this failure is almost complete lack of transparency on the commodities from plantation, traders, manufacturers, and retailers, first mile between plantations and factory. And also, you all already know that is where much of the products, legality, and environmental and social sustainability are at risk. Therefore, today's event is actually being held by WWF and WRI to discuss that and to find the solution and how to actually address that, how to include the smallholders into the traceability program. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, finally, this is an opportunity for me as my first welcoming remark as WWF. I just joined 2 weeks ago to wish you a fruitful discussion with the hope that this evening result can fill the gap to complete the basis for preparing future collective policy recommendation regarding the involvement of smallholders in supply chain traceability. I warmly welcome you again. Terima kasih.
Yes, thank you so much, Ibu. What an excellent speech. That is a really important issue for us to address, the lack of traceability with smallholders. And next, we would like to invite Mr. Bukti Bagja, Supply Chain and Life.
Ibu Dewi, would like to thanks for coming to this panel talks, and I would like also to thanks to WWF and also AFi for excellent collaboration in organizing this panel talks this afternoon. So I will give a kind of brief introduction on why do we need this panel talk this evening. As we know that actually the need of traceability and transparency is not really a new phenomenon. There has been a step change in their use, at least in the latest 10 years, mostly driven by civil organizations, private sectors, and as well as the government sector. So from global mapping of this traceability and transparency tool, discussing about data sharing. Okay, next slide, please. Of course, solutions are being developed by many players in this palm oil industry. I believe that there are various palm oil buyers are currently piloting the small-scale digital-based traceability solutions, but unfortunately, none of them are, yet scaled up across the entire supply chain. So it's very segmented and very limited. So there are some remaining challenges that I believe we will further, discuss it in this evening. The first is evaluation of effectiveness of the existing tools, because of the 94 surveyed tools and initiatives, 80% have not yet conducted or publicly shared evidence whether their initiative and tools are effective in preventing community-driven deforestation. So the evaluation is one important tool. The second is the issue on data ownership and access. There is still not yet an universally accepted protocol for protecting the privacy of individuals. Some ethical consideration needs to be discussed. So, the second is about how to navigate the discrepancies among organized system for data collection, including the incentive, because data are only useful when they can be shared in format that provide user with insight that can support the better decision making system. And the third is complexities within the supply chain, in particular those that related with smallholders. We all know that. intermediaries. This is one of the biggest challenges in Indonesia, maybe a little bit different with Malaysia or the other countries, but in Indonesia specifically, intermediaries are often not formally registered in any system. So this transaction are, black box, unregulated, and also unregistered. The independent smallholder also lack in unique identification that can allow buyer to trace and verify the origin, legality of transportation. And also, the existing situation is there's a ever-changing and dynamic and informal selling relationship. This is common in smallholders, combined with limited data collection and self-declaration that make traceability to origin is totally very difficult. So I believe that the discussion in this evening, we can, dig further and get some kind of maybe recommendation to at least overcome those challenges. So thank you again for your time, and we wish we will have a nice discussion this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bukti Bagja. I agree that traceability and transparency is an issue that is affecting today's discussion. Next, we will move on to our main event and the panel discussion, which we will present the moderator and speakers who are experts in their fields. At any time, we have coffee and tea served outside if you all need a little pick-me-up to wake up. It's a Wednesday night. It's 8 p.m. We had a long day, but I am sure that today's discussion will stimulate our brains. Please welcome our moderator today, Mrs. Gita Shahrani. Mrs. Gita Shahrani is in the executive board of Earth-Centered Economy Coalition, a collective action movement of incubators, accelerators, enablers, and impact investors, that's a mouthful, to contribute towards environmental and social impact. Yay! Gita is also the executive director to the Secretariat of Sustainable District Association, or Lingkar Temu Kabupaten Lestari, an innovative district association working towards sustainable land use through collective action. With more than a decade of experience working on sustainability, Gita is a professional convener for collective action. We welcome Gita to start today's panel discussion.
Yay, thank you. So I want to clarify just one thing. I just ended as the head of the secretariat, and the new one is there, Maristika Putri Istanti, as per 1st of November. So anything related to LTKL, now you ask her, yeah, not me. So, wow, what a great Wednesday night. Look at the full, if you haven't fully appreciate the room, I invite you to look at everybody behind you and see how full the room is on a Wednesday night, almost 8 p.m., talking about traceability, inclusivity, and smallholders. So let's give a big round of applause for everyone here. Now, just to make sure that we know everybody in the room, we will invite you to play. Anybody that has been in a session where I'm kind of moderating knows that this is kind of the trait. So it's Slido time. Just to know who is in the room, maybe we can open up the Slido. And please, you use your phone and scan the QR code, or you go directly to the website, the link, slido.com, and put the code, which is inclusive. And I want to know who are in the room today. It's quite a philosophical question. Who are you? So if you're a bit confused, also can say public, yeah. All right. Thank you. 4 people. 50% are civil society now. I'm pretty sure it's more than 5 people. So get voting, guys. Private sector, 23%. Development partners, we have association as well. We do have smallholders representative, Bang Sabar, sitting there in the back. So I'm going to go to Bang Sabar just before we open up the panel. 23, let's try to hit 40, because now there's 33. 40, 40, 35. So now civil society is still on top, 38%, but we do have a lot of different representation here. 43, yay, okay. So hopefully this gives you an insight of what we're going to be discussing today, which is how to make everything more inclusive, making sure that the people that needs to be on the table is in the table. We see civil society, private sector, development partners, smallholders representative, association, and public. There are some things that are missing. Just to note, next time, academics, youth, local government, national government potentially can also be part of the conversation. Now, I wanna just open it up. Boleh ngobrol sedikit kali ya sama Bang Sabar sebagai perwakilan dari petani. I want to give the first kind of opening to the voice that we're all talking about, which is the smallholders themselves. Mungkin pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya Bang ya. Mau nanya dong, kalau Bang Sabar sendiri nih, nanti sekalian kenalan ya dari mana. Kira-kira harapan terbesar dari ruangan penuh ini malam hari ini yang bicara tentang petani, harapan terbesarnya apa sih? Boleh nggak Bang Sabar di-share?
Sebenarnya hanya datang dengan saya Sabarudin, saya ketua Serikat Petani Kelapa Sawit. Serikat Petani Kelapa Sawit adalah Serikat Petani Kelapa Sawit itu salah satu organisasi sawit terbesar di Indonesia. Kami memiliki anggota di 20 kabupaten, 22 kabupaten, 10 provinsi, dan anggota kami 1.760 petani, 17.000, sekitar 17.000. Jadi kalau harapan kami bagi kita, saya kira sudah 2 hari ya, sudah antara di Senturi, saya kira ngobrolnya soal isu petani, isu banyak hal. Kami juga dari Serikat Petani Kelapa Sawit tadi sudah membuat acara di ini soal IKB, soal kebijakan UDR terkait dengan kebijakan Eropa terbaru, dan kalau harapan kami bicara soal traceability, teman-teman semua saya kira data itu kunci untuk kemudian perbaikan tata kelola sawit di Indonesia, karena dari 6,7 juta hektar sawit di Indonesia saya kira baru berapa persen yang tertanam. Jadi kami sudah menghitung dengan pengalaman SPKS sekitar 20.000 poligon yang kami hasilkan saat ini, anggota kami sudah terdata. Indonesia, pemerintah hanya sebenarnya butuh sekitar 4 triliun untuk kemudian mendata atau memetakan semua petani sawit di Indonesia. Kalau harapan kami, semua stakeholder di sini yang tentunya bisa membantu. Beberapa saya kira punya inisiatif yang cukup bagus, sudah bermitra dengan kami juga. Beberapa yang kami lihat di dalam dokumen ini dari komunitas. Dulu bagi kita membangun sahabat petani sawit itu semangat dari bicara traceability di petani sawit, saya kira, dan itu sudah cukup berkembang signifikan saat ini. Pemerintah sudah bicara data itu sangat penting, kemudian data ini menjadi starting untuk kemudian program pemerintah. Teman-teman semua, satu program pemerintah yang gagal itu PSR, dan itu akibat dari tidak adanya data petani sawit.
Boleh dikasih tepuk tangan, let's give a big round of applause. I'm just going to translate a bit. Bang Sabar represent the Independent Smallholders Association of Indonesia with members of more than 17,000, 17,000, yes. True. All across Indonesia. And one wish that he wished for all of us to focus on from the smallholders perspective before we begin the panel that is talking about smallholders is the importance of data, because data is key to actually, it's a gateway to start talking about better governance and achieve all of the different impact that both the government, private sector, civil society is trying to do. And they've calculated that in total, to map out all of the smallholders across Indonesia, it requires only 4 billion rupiah. Betul ya? So the hope is that we all in the room, trillion, sorry, 4 trillion rupiah. So the hope is that all of us in the room can actually voice out the same thing and make that a focus, a priority, because one of the program that Bang Sabar mentioned on perkebunan sawit rakyat actually failed because the lack of data access on smallholders. So thank you so much, Bang Sabar, for kind of setting the context from smallholders' perspective before we talked about smallholders. Thank you for filling this in. We see a lot of people representing different groups, so we're pretty sure we can discuss what Bang Sabar wishes from the smallholder perspective. Second question, is there a second question? Yeah, I think so. So one word that comes to mind when you hear improving traceability and transparency of supply chain. What is the one word that comes into your mind if you think about improving traceability and transparency of supply chain? Go ahead. Same incentives. If you see a word that you like and you agree with, you type the word again so it becomes bigger, so we can kind of see what the room, what majority of you think. Complex, data collection, foundation, data, incentive, knowing risk, messy. Keep it coming. Complex and incentives becomes bigger. Interoperability, intermediaries, hard work. Okay, let's pick some of you here. Bang Sahat, what is your one word?
Yeah, that's my first actually incentive.
Incentives. Coming to this table, halo Ibu Desti. One wordnya apa, Bu? Okay. Pak Godwin, apa Pak? What is your one word?
Hard work.
Hard work. Okay. In that spirit, 30. Okay. Now hard work, incentives, willingness, risk assessment, complex and collectives becomes bigger. Thank you so much for all of these insights. Hopefully this gives a great backdrop to all of the panelists that's going to take the stage right now. Keep it coming. We'll keep it open for now. I'd like to actually welcome the first panelist up to the stage, Ms. Ananda Putri Permatasari, the Senior Coordinator of Accountability Framework Initiative Southeast Asia Coalition. Yay! But Putri, or how we call her, is going to be talking about the framework and how AFi as an initiatives also are pushing more inclusive supply chain. And then we'd like to welcome John Dodsworth, Drivers Initiative Lead from WWF UK, to also take the stage. And John is going to talk about global market readiness and how multi-stakeholders collaboration can actually work. Next, we're going to call upon a good friend of mine, also, of everybody actually, Mr. Pistrian Ardiansyah from the Climate Smart Landscape Fund, one of the many hats that he has. Mas Pitrian is going to talk about from the investment point of view, coming down to the project level. And last but not least, we have Mas Wisnu Wibisono from Asia Investors Group on Climate Change, one of the partner of AFi in mainstreaming a lot of accountability framework indicators. So now I'm just going to join you on stage for a while, and then I'll come back to you. Don't worry. Okay. So how are you today, everyone? Good? Okay. Sleepy? No, a little bit, yeah? After a full stomach after dinner. So we're going to just have fun right now. Just quick opening statement from each of you, just one sentence. How do you work to try to create more inclusive supply chain in one sentence? Hello?
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Collaboration.
Oh, it's one word, not one sentence? You can do one sentence. It's okay.
Okay. We can create inclusive supply chains with collaboration.
Okay. Creating inclusive supply chain through collaboration. What about you, John?
Working between consumer and producers. So basically joining that.
Okay. So bridging between consumers and producers.
I don't know whether I'm using the right phrase.
Okay.
It's like putting skin on the meat or putting the meat on the bone.
Oh,
Skin on the bone.
Skin on the bone.
You're really English. So, so in a way,
Yeah.
if you individually and also coming from different stakeholders,
Mhm.
parties will not provide or contribute to the game or to the system
Yeah.
as concrete as possible,
Yeah.
will not achieve anything.
Okay. So this is putting skin in the game and contribute concretely down to the ground level. Mas Wisnu, your one sentence describing what is it that you do?
One sentence, yeah.
One sentence.
Building investors' awareness on this issue.
Building investors' awareness on the issue. Okay. Now that we have that context, boleh kalau mau tepuk tangan loh. You can clap, but now that we know the context, we'll go directly diving into the first segment of today's talk. And we're going to kind of think about the innovation part. And I'd like to actually begin with John. In terms of looking at it from the global market perspective and producing countries like Indonesia and like many others that you work with, why is it that we do need to care about things like traceability, inclusive supply chain, and other impacts, and why it makes sense?
Okay. I'll keep this short, but I think if we go back a few years, there was a good example where particular civil society in Europe presented possibly a negative steer towards palm oil.
Yeah.
And that possibly set back sustainable palm oil arguably by a decade in some cases. And what has been interesting to relay what retailers have told us in both UK and Europe is this EU regulation, or if you look at this more globally,
Yeah.
can actually instill further confidence. Because we know we've had the first speakers how productive palm oil is per hectare, and ultimately I think it's 6% of global land that produces 40% of vegetable oil. So in reality, there's one, so consumer confidence. I think if we instill a commodity that we need, palm oil. I think secondly, and it's interesting to the other sort of comment around instilling confidence in investors. There's an element where traceability can actually support and mitigate risk. I saw on the slide there was a discussion on risk assessment, and that's I think the key component of this, that traceability can actually, and that level of transparency can actually instill confidence in investors and also actually mitigate risk, which ultimately you can see various negative news stories and it can help mitigate. So I think in summary, I think we can see these measures as an opportunity, as again one of those slide over. And I'll leave it there now.
I want to chase you a little bit on that. If you can maybe highlight some examples that you think are already showcasing this hypothesis that if you follow the global market trend of how you should treat supply chain, it's actually beneficial based on the factors that you just mentioned.
Okay. I'll take a recent visit. So I'm just about at the beginning, but with smallholder growers. One of the key things they said is the ability to be certified, providing the confidence that they had access to a market, which otherwise they would feel they'd be beholden to other market rules. So I think in that case, but again, it comes down to that benefit sharing. Again, it's that is being discussed, but ultimately needs further work both at the policy level, but also the market level. So I think that's an example where we've seen it be effective. But to what the gentleman from WRI said, it's piece at scale.
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't have that, so ultimately we're not able to realise that at that landscape jurisdiction.
Thanks. And with that, I think because you mentioned scale and kind of what would be the method that we can use to replicate this in a wider pathway, I'd like to actually move to Mas Fitrian, because you mentioned that you are going to put skin in the game kind of thing and be on the ground and directly impacting on the ground through the ACLF. I'm wondering whether the type of innovation that ACLF right now offers gives that opportunity to work at scale, to actually impact smallholders, and to actually prove that inclusive supply chain is beneficial for all of the parties that's involved. Mas Fitrian, I just got information that this one doesn't go to Zoom, so you can use my mic. I don't think you should. You have to repeat the whole thing, but just like start where you left off. Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry for that.
So,
You were describing
yeah.
the four impacts.
Yeah, just straightforward. I think because we are also focusing not only on the financial returns or commercial return, but also on impacts. This has given us some not only good motivations, but also ammunitions to work with partners and also increasing our capacity to get that kind of understanding, data, and information to understand whether we can achieve those impacts. Let's say if we want to claim as a narrative of impacts,
Yeah.
better land use,
Yeah.
like 1,000 hectares or 1,000,000 hectares or whatever of good forest management or forest protection, where are those? If we want to understand that we are achieving impacts of livelihood,
Yeah.
we cannot only work or invest in companies that have good portfolio
Yeah.
of assets,
Yeah.
but do not have the scalability or the sourcing areas that connecting them to smallholders. So I think that will be so crucial. And even if they claim they have smallholders in the sourcing area, we have to understand whether the partnerships are really being developed as fair as possible and as good as possible, in which that they also providing back the improvement through training,
Yeah.
capacity building, through traceability and mapping and whatnot. So FAIR is not only STEM
Yeah.
towards certification, but we want to understand and verify that. Of course, we cannot do alone. That's why
Yeah.
partnership is key.
It's key.
So I hope that
Yeah.
wrap it up in a good way.
No, it's good, but I just want like one more point from you, which is there a certain target that you really aim in terms of, okay, if we achieve this, then it means we are impacting smallholders' life in particular.
Yeah. The business of claim or attribution is so dangerous. Of
Yes.
course. What we can do and we are now trying to do is that we have these targets, like X million tonnage of carbon emission reduction contributions, X thousand hectares or whatever for better land use, and X percentage of improvement and whatnot. But if we, through the projects that we are investing or landscape that we are supporting, can achieve that, we say that, okay, this then would bring so much improvement, not only in the fund, but other funds that we are managing could also mimic that and replicate, and also partners, because we got LPs, limited partners that are investing in us. I think they also would like to not only learn, but hijack and replicate to other funds. So the replicability, again, Mas Wisnu is much better positioned in explaining that. I think it would be so crucial because, yes, they are financiers, they are quite eager, but they are also risk averse, especially in Asia. So if you can show there are good models and it's working and achieving something, both returns and impacts, they will do that. Otherwise, that's going to be challenging.
Thank you for that. And despite the complexity, I like how Pak Bagja ended his presentation. It's complex, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And then you just have to do it. And from Mas Fitrian description, I actually want to go to Mbak Putri now, because Mas Fitrian was mentioning a lot about targeting impacts and making sure that the impacts are something that is measurable. And the fact that from the investor's perspective or from project perspective, they cannot do it alone. They need guidelines, they need partners, they need boots on the ground. Now, accountability framework provide at least the framework and then connectivity with the initiative members, so that at the end, things like this that are showing good innovation can actually be implemented on the ground. Maybe can you share a little bit about what the framework is for and how is it being used right now?
Yeah, so in terms of traceability, transparency, the accountability framework provides every supply chain actors on how is the foundational concept of traceability and transparency before we choose the correct tools that could support our work, as already presented by Pak Bagja before. According to the findings in the Forest Data Partnerships report that has just launched a couple of weeks ago, there are a lot of tools available that we could utilize. But to make sure we choose it correctly, so it is very important that we understand what are the essential parameters of traceability, and also to understand what is our position in supply chains, because supply chains consist of various different actors to collaborate. So the accountability framework provides key parameters such as the definitions of traceability, transparency, and then sort of guidelines on how much traceability is enough, for example, for primary processor or for downstream companies, and then how can product origins be sufficiently known or controlled, and of course, how to ensure the inclusion, including to the smallholders. And to achieve that, of course, companies need to participate to influence the dynamics, including the policy dynamics through collaboration in the landscape level, for example.
And do you think, in terms of looking at it from company uptake, does company actually use the framework? And if yes, how do they use it to support the agenda of making sure smallholders gets included? Is there any example maybe you can share?
Yeah, there are some examples, mostly from global levels, yeah, on how to engage smallholders in the supply chain. Uh, Basically, the key message in the accountability framework is to prioritize engagement with smallholders, even though they are not able to comply
Yeah.
with the requirements, rather than suspending or excluding in the supply chain. So around 1 or 2 months ago, there was a good example presented by a webinar conducted by Accountability Framework. It is accessible in our website and YouTube. There was a great example from Nestle on how they explore various ways to engage with the suppliers and smallholders,
Yeah.
and they already reached like more than 90% this deforestation and conversion-free supply chain.
Thank you for that. I'll come back to you and maybe ask a little bit more on how it's being implemented in Indonesia context for medium size. Now, Mas Wisno, your name was mentioned a lot by Mas Fitrian, and I'm wondering, looking at it from the Asia perspective, especially, maybe explain to the audience in the room first about the dynamic of your members in Asia and how did they see issues like this? Sustainable supply chain, smallholders. Is it relatable? Is it something that is already being discussed?
Yeah. Thank you, Mbak Gita, for the question. Before I answer that, I would like to provide some context on what is Asia Investor Group on Climate Change, or AIGCC in short. So we are a member-based organization where our member are investment managers, asset owners. So think of pension fund, insurance company that have asset management. And right now we have around 70 members in globally. But the purpose of AIGCC is to drive the awareness and also to drive the investment on climate and nature by investors in Asia. So our focus is really in Asia. And going back to your point in regards to what's the perspective of Asian investors, probably I'll go back one step back to the global investors landscape. So right now, what is happening is investors also have climate commitments. So it's not just companies, but global investors also have climate commitments. And as the same as companies, one question that comes into when we are talking about climate commitments, whether it is a valid commitment, whether it's a valid goal. So investors also have that sort of framework where net zero investment framework, investor climate action plan, that sort of framework provides the guidance for investors that wants to set their climate targets. So right now, or before that, the focus was really more on climate. But what is happening now, there's a shift towards the understanding that investors cannot achieve their net zero goals, they cannot achieve their climate goals without really addressing deforestation. So what is happening now, aside from the awareness from the investor itself, but also from this framework that I mentioned earlier that are being referenced by the global investors, that they are starting to see that the framework also includes deforestation as a high-risk sector, AFOLU as a high-risk sector that needs to be addressed if they want to claim that they have a net zero target or they have a net zero commitment. So that's one thing. There's a shift not only from the awareness, but also from the framework that guides investor for their net zero goals. And in terms of Asia, I think it's really interesting to see when we are talking about forest and land use engagement, we kind of used to hear that European investors, not American investors, doing this sort of thing, engagement on forest and land use. But what we are seeing now, so in AIGCC, we really build, our focus is one of them is to build the capacity of our investors to integrate nature and climate into their investment decision. And we do that through working groups. We do that investor peer-to-peer learning. So what happened is we also have global investors that also have investment in Asia. So we usually have this sharing session where this global investor shares with the other members on, how they try to address this issue. We also have master classes. We are developing, right now, AFi is also supporting on developing a course for investment analysts on forest and land use issue. So right now we have the forest and land use workstream in AIGCC, and seeing this interest from a lot of our members in joining this workstream really shows that Asian investors are all actually interested in this topic, because again, there's the shift of understanding that before it was just climate, it was just net zero goal, but then you cannot achieve it without addressing deforestation, especially if they are investing in this region where there's a lot of forest areas. So I think back to your question, I think there's that shift from global investors, and Asian investors are starting to really understand. They're also trying to take action. They are also taking ways to try to address this issue. And I think one more thing that I want to highlight is when we talk about, because just now Mas Fitrian mentioned about traditional investors, I think the types of investors that join in our association is mostly what Pak Fitrian said as traditional investors, where they are integrating ESG aspects into their investment process. And right now, a lot of Asian companies, they really try to address this forest and land issue through their investment decision. And when we talk about investment, it's always about risk and return. And right now, a lot of our work is really developing the capacity of investors to really understand this issue.
Yeah.
What is the challenge? And right now, we're also trying to understand what are the tools for them to really see what are the risks to their investment portfolio. And going forward, we are also trying to look at opportunities where investors could also invest. But that will be another discussion, but happy to address it later on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm coming back to like the smallholders topic and what Bang Sabar earlier mentioned, right? We need 4 trillion rupiah in order to map all smallholders across the country. So I'll leave you with that thought with Mas Fitrian and you. You might have ideas. And now I'll go back to John actually. So a lot of the keywords that I've been picking up is people cannot work alone. There are different complexity in different roles that everybody are playing. And WWF have been working in a lot of multi-stakeholders effort. Maybe you want to highlight an example or two about how is it integrated into creating an inclusive supply chain, especially with the smallholders at the heart of it.
Super. So I'll use one example, but I think the word to use is these public-private sector partnerships, which I think we've seen be incredibly effective with initiatives on climate change, on the illegal wildlife trade, and now we're starting to see it, I think, on commodities. And we have a partnership with HSBC and WRI, which specifically focuses on, it's called the Asia Sustainable Palm Oil Linkages Program. And where possibly 10 years ago, a program might have focused on a specific country, this program focuses across the supply chain. So it's working in both Indonesia and Malaysia, working in Singapore with traders in the private sector, but then also working in key consumption countries as well. And I think a key component of this has actually been looking at smallholder inclusion, but also the traceability angle for the traders, and also then consumer awareness, but also working with key buyers and working with, for example, the China Sustainable Palm Oil Alliance, and really mobilizing actors. So looking at this at a more systemic level rather than an activity-led type of program. And I think that as an example for us has actually been able to see how we can mobilize countries at the same time. So very much this connection between producer and consumer country, which is where we've started to see value. And it's also an example where we've been able to see certification of smallholders and cooperatives. But that topic of scale, I think, is and also the speed at which we need to move. And that is one of the sort of things we're working on at the moment to address.
But it's almost like, is it a choice? Sometimes they say it's a choice, right? If you want to be very inclusive, then for sure it's not going to be fast. And maybe vice versa. Have any thoughts about that?
I think I'd defer to my colleagues on stage. It's a really difficult one. I think what we're starting to see, and if we look at this as a cross-commodity topic, we hear about tipping points, 2030, cut-off points, and such from scientists. And I think the urgency, I think, is now in that. So I think that ability to speed and for scale is necessary. And I think that's the other piece around, colleagues on the panel here sort of discussing this piece on mobilizing finance at pace. Because we do know that topic on stranded assets, we look at climate change, is all to be present. So I think that ability to redirect finance is going to be a key point. But I defer to others on the point on, does speed necessitate making decisions that don't allow us to be as inclusive? But I don't know.
I promise I'll ask others that, so I don't want to put you on the spot. Thank you, John. But that was such a eloquent answer as well. I think it's almost, you cannot work at scale unless you're inclusive. And this is something that AFI kind of work as an initiative and cross-organization. So maybe Mbak Putri, and speaking of inclusive, right? In Southeast Asia context, AFI decide to actually look at medium-sized companies instead of working with more advanced one. And that is actually an attempt to create inclusivity. Is it working? Is it something that you would recommend to be a strategy in this context?
Yeah, so that is correct that one of our working strategies is to engage, trying to promote engagements, in the small and medium-sized companies. And there are two examples that I can share tonight. First is that the Coalition of Accountability Framework Initiative has been facilitating companies to train their direct suppliers, as facilitated by Mbak Nanda. Yeah, she's beside Ibu Desi. Yeah, especially to assist them on doing the landscape monitoring. And other example is we already facilitated at least 5 or 7 companies to conduct self-assessment on defining the gaps on their ethical supply chain journey. So those journeys are still in progress. We are looking forward to great results, of course. And if I may add to this discussion, there is also a challenge actually on engaging small and medium-sized companies, because we all know that actually there are still a lot of market share of non-sustainable or non-certified palm oil. So this kind of situation lead to low pressure on the performance of the small and medium companies to improve on their sustainability. So what I would like to highlight here is that it is really important for voluntary approach to complement the mandatory or top-down approach. And in the mandatory side, I would say that accountability framework could guide the supply chain actors on how to collaborate again. For example, through the landscape initiative, landscape approach, jurisdictional approach, or sectoral initiative to influence the dynamics of the policy there, and also the coordination with various actors.
Thank you. And I think that was a good example of, maybe if you look at inclusivity as a way to also have outreach on cross commodities, for example, then a lot of the root causes that smallholders across different commodities can be solved together, something like that. Now, the 4 trillion rupiah question to the two gentlemen here. What do you think, Mas Wisno? Any chance to get
Yep.
that type of fund?
Very difficult question, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the thing that I always mention when I discuss when there's a question about investment,
Yeah.
direct investment. So one of the key challenge of traditional investors that we have to understand that they have this limitation of scale. So one is scale. So I think because the size is so big, then it's answered
Yeah.
scale. But the second one is investment instrument,
Mm.
because most of the time asset managers, they are investment managers, they are limited to the types of
Yeah.
investment that they can invest in. Usually is in public equities, saham, bond, surat utang.
Yeah.
And therefore, to invest directly into this, this type of amount, it would be difficult without the right instrument. And that's why I had a discussion with Mas Fitrian before. These types of fund, like ACLF,
Yeah.
is, I think, would be very important going forward, because there's a lot of interest for investors to invest in nature, but the instrument is not there yet.
Mm.
And the instrument, the ACLF, is, I would say, could facilitate, because investors, they cannot directly invest in a project. They don't have the capacity to monitor.
Yeah.
They don't have the MRB capacity.
Yeah.
Funds like ACLF, they have the capacity to monitor it. And investors usually, as an LP, just now, Mas Fitrian mentioned
Yeah.
about limited partner. Investor can invest as a limited partner in the fund. And therefore, I would say the growth of these types of fund going forward would be really critical
Yeah.
in supporting, in driving the finance towards nature, forest and land use, and especially sustainable palm oil supply chain.
Thank you. And I'd highlight your key point, which is the missing piece is maybe an instrument that all of the investors that are interested but have limitation can collectively move their resources towards. So on to Mas Fitrian, it was very specific needs that the Smallholders Association mentioned, right? 4 trillion rupiah for mapping and building a database that's accessible, that can become benchmark for a lot of the initiatives, both from government, civil society, to improve not only the smallholders' productivity, for example, but the governance as a whole. If that is the challenge, and Mas Wisnu mentioned that ACLF can be that missing instrument, how would you structure it?
It's like you're giving us a Bible, so we can. It's well, let me say it differently.
Yeah.
So I think 4 trillion rupiahs, or I just calculated now. It's
Whoa.
$266 million.
You were like writing it, like calculating it on paper?
Yeah, in real life.
Wow.
It's okay. So of course, if you want to fundraise or
Yeah.
expect anyone to invest in just for the mapping
Yes.
sake, that won't happen.
Okay.
But if the mapping or traceability or systems or tools that are being used to improve the supply chains, towards
Yeah.
sustainability, toward improving the transitions,
Yeah.
achieving climate goals and whatnot, I think that would make sense. And we have to develop this as one particular structure,
Yeah.
contributing to that kind of structure. I mean, outside we talk about JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnerships. Like it or not, it has created this kind of structure, and investors and government
Yeah.
are willing to contribute to up to 20 billion
Billion,
in Indonesia. I heard some rumors over the grapevine that there will be, or there could be, a country package like that for forest and land use.
Yeah.
So we need to check. and mapping or baselining or data acquisitions would be crucial.
Yeah.
So $200 million compared to $20 billion should be peanut.
Yeah.
But of course, again, this needs to be connected to the bigger structure of investment, like Mas Wisnu said. In addition to that, I mean, thank you for mentioning HCLF as a possible financial aggregation or facility or instrument that can reach up to scale. But I also would like to add two potential or possible aggregations. The first one is physical aggregations. I think Putri, you mentioned that you work with mid-sized companies, the second and third tier companies. They can act as this potential aggregation because they know much better about their supply chains, their sourcing areas. They can work together with SPKS or smallholders or farmers organizations in their sourcing areas. Unfortunately, I think in the context of Indonesia, not many mid-sized companies are approached by NGOs, development partners, or others. The big companies, I saw my good friend Ibu Wahyu, like Ibu Desi from Sinarmas, and they're big, but they're also getting supply from the mid-sized company and small, medium enterprises. That's going to be both challenging, but also creating opportunities. So physical aggregation would be, and of course, physical aggregations can also be added to like cooperatives, but there are plenty of cooperatives, but they're quite small. We can learn from, let's say, CU in West Kalimantan because they have also a giant type of scale in terms of creating. The second one is, I think, what I have to say, I cannot read my own writing.
You can calculate math really quickly, but you cannot read your handwriting. It's okay.
But it's digital aggregation.
Digital, physical and digital.
Yeah, because there are plenty of partners, I think, around the room, inside the room, and also around the conference that have pushed forward that kind of ability or improvement of system in which, regardless of the areas, you can cover so many smallholders. I think I saw Mas Aino Rafik from Coltiva, and many others as well. They can act as this kind of good partners with smallholders to get the mapping, but also to get the scalability, both toward the sourcing areas, but also linking directly to market. Without those aggregations, physical, digital, and financial aggregation, then it will be challenging. Last but not least, spiritual aggregation, but that's something that we can talk in different situations.
No, but it's true, right? I think aggregation, like spiritual aggregation, is the willingness of all of us to try to collaborate. So in that spirit, I'm going to go back to the floor because it's Q&A question to be inclusive as well. We have around 20 minutes for Q&A. And maybe the first round, the first 3 questions. Anybody wants to ask any question? Raise your hand, or you can also use the Slido link if we can pull up the Slido back. Ada yang mau tanya? Any question in the room? Okay. Shy. Otherwise, I'll go to you and ask a question actually. No? From the back of the room? Okay for now? Mas Langlang? I think you want to ask. Your face looks like you want to ask. This is the spiritual aggregation part. Sure. Oh, you wrote down something, so my guess was right.
About
kind of making sure that the cost center on the ground becomes something that is viable to be seen as return, potential return. Thank you, Mas Lang Lang. Any takers, or we'll go to Mas Wisnu for your answer. And if others have comments also, feel free.
So I think I just want to clarify a bit. I meant just now, investors are right now looking at companies, really understand what are the climate as well as the deforestation risks. So investors really want to understand uh, from the climate lens and also from the deforestation lens, because they have a commitment, they have a climate commitment, and then they also have some of them already have a nature commitment. And if let's say one of their investee company is then doing deforestation, it's gonna invalidate their climate commitment. It's going to invalidate their forest or nature commitment. So really right now, investors are trying to really assess through different tools. One of them is through Forest 500 spot to really understand which company are at high risk of deforestation. And not only at the high risk of deforestation, when we link it with today's discussion on smallholder, I know there's already some of my members, some of the investors that already have asked to companies like, how far have you engaged with the smallholder? Because they, excuse me, they understand that deforestation issue is not only about environment, but it's also about social issue, which the main key of social issue is the smallholder issue. So in relation to that, how investors are trying to mitigate those risks. So first one is they really try to understand their investee company, what their investee company are doing, what are their exposure. And then after understanding which company are at high risk, probably they see the high risk based on whether this company see deforestation policy, whether the company has already HCB or HCS assessment, whether they already started doing RSPO certification. And then when they see companies that they think are at risk, then they gonna do another step, which the next step is just now we heard from Mbak Putri is we heard that you're doing engagement with companies. So investors are also actually doing engagement with companies. And really the purpose of this engagement with companies, for companies that are just starting, for investors that are just starting this engagement journey, usually they started by trying to understand what is the progress of the company, what the companies are doing, how they are addressing. But at some point when the engagement have been at certain point where they think needs to make a process, then investor could also ask the company to make changes. For example, the engagement has been done a lot in the climate space mostly. And I know there's some discussion, even investors ask the company to reduce not only their scope 1 or scope 2, but scope 3 emission. So investors right now really want to take action. And I would say one of their key lever of taking action and mitigating their own risks actually is through engagement, because they do realize that they have a share of the company. They own a portion of their company through their equity, through their saham, and therefore they use that influence to make sure the company is not doing impact, and at the same time, if the company is doing negative impact, it will also harm their share price. It will then, if the share price drop down, the investment of the investor gonna come down. So at the same time, they also try to mitigate their own risk. So I think I just want to highlight that engagement is happening right now. And for companies, especially companies in Asia, in Indonesia, a lot of Asian investors really want to learn from you, really want to understand what are your action, how they can support you as well. So I think that's also a note from me on engagement. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, let's try. I think this one is a bit weird. Yeah, let's try. Sorry. Thank you, Mas Wisnu. Maybe one follow-up question before I open it back to the floor. What you said about engagement. And maybe I'm going to go to John and ask this question. Sometimes it might be easier for us to say, okay, if it's high risk, then might as well like cut it loose versus continuing the engagement. And I think WWF has this practice of continuous engagement with different stakeholders, including the company, when it comes to market transformation. Maybe can you help explain a little bit of the reasoning why that strategy becomes the core strategy that WWF also implement?
It's a really good question. It's discussion I think when we found specifically engagement issues on client basis, but also ultimately we're going to see around the events raising, for instance, working with financial institutions, you're talking about engaging a progress sustainability team, but notice compliance with asset. So you're working possibly across an organization with the awareness raising, and then also supporting it's maybe a middle point. I do think if we like to see that short.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. And public-private, you'll have one more question as well. So I can go back to Mas Wisnu and then ask this question afterwards. So go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to add because I think this is a very related topic also to the investment industry. Just a bit of context because you mentioned about continuing engagement, which I think is really the right step. And that's also what is being done in the investment industry. So a bit of context, in the past, the trend was more to divest from company. So if the company is doing harm, then investor will divest. But now there's this growing understanding, there's growing awareness that actually divesting is not gonna make that much change, but it's better to keep a share in that company, still have that influence in the company and engage them throughout the time. However, I just also need to note that some investors also have this escalation point where maybe after 3 or 4 years there's no change, then it will affect the investment decision. Investment decision can mean a lot of things, but I also just want to highlight that this is also happening in the investment industry.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And it's good news, right? That the signal is consistent and highlighted points from John that public-private partnership cannot happen unless engagement becomes the core approach. Thank you. There's one question in the Slido that's most of due diligence process has not been considered due to lack of disbursement. How do you see to overcome this? So I think this is related to investment. Maybe Mas Fitrian, you want to tackle this one?
Maybe what does it mean? I mean,
yeah, I think I don't know. Actually, I can interpret, but maybe somebody that is asking that question, show of hand, or maybe we got it from the online crowd. Let's interpret it. So the if you have a fund and part of the main process that you mentioned, right? You define the impact and then you try to look at projects and different companies and you do the due diligence process in order to make sure that this happens or not. But because there's such a small number of ready portfolio, people disregards it and kind of okay lah, kind of water it down a bit. So you can actually make the disbursement happen. What do you think?
So I think it depends so much on which type of investment facility or
Yeah.
funds that you are working with. I have some experience also from previous slide. In many ways, if those impact funds or investment facilities or investors have already put forward criteria or objectives or impact targets, and others, and especially publish these type of impact targets, I think they will be pushed internally and also by external forces to show that they have followed through this kind of due diligence, both financial due diligence and also risk or ES due diligence, environmental social due diligence. I think the biggest challenge of all, based on my understanding, we are not living in ideal world.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to the mapping process, coming back to the baseline and data setting up. If there's no data that you can collect regarding potential project and what have you, of course, you then need to ask partners, consulting firm, NGOs to provide that kind of data. Some commodities, some sourcing areas, landscape have already established that kind of data set and baseline and good information, but many may not necessarily have that kind of existing data. So we have to work from what we got. And of course, throughout the project period of investment or period, then we say that, okay, we want to improve this kind of data set. So I will say that almost no organizations that I work with or funds that I work with disregard that, but they have to work within the framework or within the availability of data that they have. So that's why partnership, like John said, would be so crucial. In the context of SELF, Gita, the fund, we are also working with donors and NGOs to provide us with both technical assistance and grant facility.
Yeah.
Because some of the areas that we want to work with, again, have no data or baseline data or lack of it. So we have to work with them to provide us or contribute to that kind of establishment of data and information that can achieve mitigation of risk as well as the impacts that we want to create.
Yeah. So going back to your first comment on how do you frame these fundamental things that might not be considered as a viable portfolio or a good return rate, but because it's such a fundamental thing, then it's worth it.
Just one additional important element. Investors, financiers, all of us will not live forever. And as a result, there is time frame.
Yeah.
This is a bit, so there's a misunderstanding. I used to work for NGOs, working for financial institutions. The time frame may not necessarily match.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Some investors would like to have investment
Very
in
short.
like short.
Yeah.
Capital or even capex 2 years and then they get loosened and they can exit refinancing or whatnot. Some can go to midterm loan or investment. Equity can be a bit longer perhaps, depending on the exit. Sometimes they cannot exit the issues and portfolio. But because of the time frame, the objectives of the impacts or the impact targets may not necessarily be achieved 100%. Because the impacts will only be felt often after the project period.
Yeah.
Like the livelihood.
You cannot see immediately.
Yeah, I mean, income can, be assessed right away.
Yeah.
If you develop sourcing areas, supply chains, then suddenly you got this kind of trading or off-taking, then income
goes up.
But the livelihood, it links to crop diversification, opportunity of health, provisions, and that cannot be assessed within the project period. Some of them. NCP NCS is straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
but really whether that would lead to no deforestation, so reduction of deforestation of biodiversity, I think you need to ask Sahat, for instance. What I mean, that's something that we also learning. We are learning whether that kind of things can be incorporated in the project or long period or investment period. So it's not going to be ideal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mas Fitrian. I'm going to actually have one more room for one or two more questions from the audience. Any takers? Oh. Your name, where you're from, what's the question is, and for what? And for who?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tika from Asia Secretariat. So I think my questions, I don't know, maybe Mas Fitrian or Mas Wisnu or Mbak Putri, but my question is about like the existing conditions, especially in the districts, is about the readiness. Because if we talk about the investment, we find the fact because of there is a gap between the investment, like Mas Wisnu mentions before. Okay, there are market size or investment size in a global level. Okay, and we can tap in. But if we want to tap in the district level, in the jurisdiction, there is a gap about the readiness. There is no pipeline ready, and it will be an investor interest to invest in the district level because of the readiness. There is no pipeline. So my question is, what is the initial step that we have to cut the gaps between the investor or the market needs and also the district conditions, district existing? And the second one, because of those gap, and especially about the human resources skill in the district level. So the question is like how to make sure, like, because before we got the readiness in the district, most likely the gaps is coming from the capacity in the district level. So that's why my question, it is possible for the investor or for the companies that want to invest on the human resources capacity building to make sure we have to cut the gaps between the investor needs and also the district existing condition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe Mbak Putri first, actually, looking at it from the way that accountability framework is being built, a lot of it comes to do with who is executing on the ground, right? And if there's no one executing on the ground, if there's lack of human resources, as Maristika mentioned it, is there any particular discussion point that reflect how to address that?
A broad thought, I think, yeah, about that, on how to start filling the gap in the district. There are could be a lot of options on where to start. So I'm sure there are a lot of answers to this. But what we could start, yeah, I think, is by translating the fancy frameworks, fancy initiatives that we have at the global level or regional level into more local context. I think we LTKL also have good example trying together with some other organizations to try integrating values of ethical supply chains into some policy instruments that is applied at the local level. So that is one sort of great examples. And according and related to the idea on capacity building in the human resources skill, I think that would be like a great idea. And accountability framework in general strongly suggests any kind of support, both technically and financially, how to fill gaps, generally in achieving ideal sustainability state, and also specifically in creating traceability and transparency in supply chains. And from the perspective of companies, I remember my discussion yesterday with Pastor. So we, so yeah, from the low hanging fruit that we can promote to the company is that companies should have a commitment first, because regardless of whether they are following certain tools, yeah, for example, certifications, it is still necessary that the company to have commitment, because the commitment is a condition to measure against. So it reflects integrity, I would say, of the company. And by having that commitment, company is sort of being committed, yeah, to create a transformation in their supply chain, including collaborations, like providing capacity building and so on. Because sustainability can only be achieved if everyone is involved, everyone is involved. Maybe I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mbak Putri. Mas Fitrian or Mas Wisnu, I think maybe you want to comment on like a more straight, what Mbak Putri just alluded, because when it makes sense, sorry, my head is like, where is the camera? Suddenly it's there. But what Mbak Putri just alluded in terms of looking at this from how is it being seen as something beneficial, investing on human resources is something that's beneficial for the company. Would that be something that's also acceptable coming from the investor's eye? Would human capital, investing on human capital be something that is considered also good return option?
Well, it's so difficult to be philosophical at this point of time, but
So maybe practical.
yeah, just trying to be practical. I just based on our experience right now, I mean, we can only go to certain areas.
Yeah.
Landscape, districts, even projects or companies, if we have a big triangle of complementaries, just found the words. So one is, of course, you got the off-taking, the demand. If there's a good signal, a strong signal from the demand side, be it at the global level or at the national or regional level, that would really provide stronger appetite for investors. Because off-taking would then hopefully guarantee the continuations of economic activities. And then this needs to be connected to the sourcing or the supplies. Again, the supply needs to be guaranteed that it is going to be consistent in terms of quality, quantity, and meeting the sustainability standard. And then, of course, then you have to be able to connect this to what we call the investees. I salute, because I was part of it, and I'm still the landscape approach of just sustainable jurisdictions. But I think what you guys, Tika and others, have already also gone forward is to create this kind of potential investing. The local firms, the local entities, the Alam Siak Lestari, that's one of the cases. That can be incubated further, in which then maybe at this point of time, the ticket size for them may not necessarily link to what Mas Wisnu has. More or less like less than $100,000 perhaps in terms of investment. Maybe I'm wrong. But if we can find this more and more and working together with even the bigger companies working already in this area, and they can identify the mid-sized or small, medium enterprises that are supplying to those companies, then you get more and more potential investing. So these three things, if you have those in your jurisdictions, I think many investors would be willing. And of course, the foundation of that would be the data informations, both for economic activity and financial returns, linking to that, but also the impacts and the risks.
Thank you so much, Mas Fitrian. Thank you so much for everybody that's in the room. Let's give a big round of applause. Mas Wisnu, I'm going to release you from that. Oh my God, what's wrong with this mic? I'm going to release you from that obligation, but leave you with one homework, panelists. You're not free yet. Last sentence is the closing statement. If you were to ask everybody in the room that's here on a Wednesday night until 9 o'clock, talking about inclusive supply chain, what is it that they need to focus on so that this gets implemented, not only being talked about, but implemented, what would it be? One sentence. So that's your homework. And then to all of you in the room, we have one last question for you. Maybe we go to the poll side. Okay. How would you be utilizing the insights that you gathered from today's panel in your daily activities? So that is your question. How are you going to utilize all of the insights? Is it just as a reference point? Would you be doing something actively? Would you be chasing the panelists maybe for a collaboration? Anything that you can think of that is a concrete use of why we are gathering here until late this night, talking about a very serious topic. Reference point, have a nice dream. Commitment. Okay. People are like joking around at this point in time. But I'm going to ask for maybe 15 or 20 more seconds before I go back to the panelists. And because Masahat, your name keeps getting mentioned, right? How are you going to utilize today's insight in your daily activities? Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the balance between investment model and implementation on ground, linking with the commitment from company, I think is always important. And even your daily activities, my daily activities, we are supporting companies to commit and also to improve their implementation, including engaging their suppliers, motivating their suppliers, and using the knowledge from the speakers here. I think there's always there is a potential way on how you're linking the green investment, impact investment in your sustainability journey. So I think it's something matters.
Thank you. Thank you so much for Masahat and everybody that has filled it in. I'll read out some. Investors start to seek ISH for funding. Bring people together to help developing more investable instruments for investors around topics of AFOLU. So there you go, Mas Wisnu. Exciting to explore an innovative model for unlocking the tangible incentives. Continue develop solutions with collaboration with all stakeholders. Thank you so much for all of the participants. Back to the panelists. One sentence, one word, your choice. What should be the focus of everybody in the room so that this gets implemented from theory to implementation? Yeah, go ahead, Mas Wisnu.
Okay, I go first. So I think today's discussion, I keep highlighting about building investor awareness. I go back to my first point. So I think important thing, especially for companies, is transparency of what they are doing, of their data, because by investor understanding what you are doing, they're also will be there to understand what you're doing and support you as well through their engagement. So transparency is the word.
Transparency is the word. Continuous engagement is the approach. Thank you. Mas Fitrian?
Maybe just straightforward. I mean, everyone here in this room has already got their work.
Yeah.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
You got your own strength.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can find gaps that can improve that kind of strength to achieve something more. And then maybe after you identify the gaps, you then identify the partners and then there's the capital to support them.
Thank you. Identifying gaps.
So in a recent discussion we had with a number of financial institutions, one of the takeaways from that was at least actually we need to show what good looks like.
Yeah.
So ultimately we often talk about companies steps.
Yeah. Great. So more success stories, analytics. Mbak Putri?
So, related to traceability, how
Yeah.
to incentivize it financially and technically, I would say it's like practicing democracy because we should agree first on the key principles, both in technical terms and financial terms. But then we can create many ways on how to
Yeah.
achieve those principles together. So the word is practicing democracy.
Practicing democracy. With that, let's give a big round of applause for all of the panelists again and for everybody in the room. You guys are such a troops. Thank you so much for absorbing a lot of the information, engaging also with the panelists. Before I close out and provide this the stage back to the MC, I think. I'm just going to end with a little poem. I have this habit. So the word is data for me. The D stands for democracy of data belongs not only to the people in the room, but actually the people on the ground. The A stands for additional efforts to continue engaging means more than cutting off. The T stands for traceability and transparency is something that needs to be practiced. And A stands for accountability in our supply chain goes into accountability to ourselves. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Gita Syahrani from Koalisi Ekonomi Membumi. Until next time, and I'll give it back to the MC.